The Federation is presented as a society where citizens are free to pursue their own meaning without the pressures that defined earlier centuries. But on screen, nearly every civilian character works, competes, and conforms to social expectations that are never questioned. The system did not eliminate obligation, it redesigned it. The real question is not whether the Federation provides comfort, but what it demands in exchange. Daily life in the Federation is not the absence of constraint. It is constraint made invisible by abundance. The Federation economy eliminated scarcity, but it did not eliminate labor. Replicators produce goods, antimatter powers starships, industrial replicators construct habitats. But these systems require oversight, maintenance, and coordination. The labor is not industrial, it is administrative, technical, and social. The Federation does not force its citizens to work, but it structures incentives so that most of them do anyway. The mechanism is not coercion, it is purpose. On screen, nearly every civilian character introduced has a profession. Scientists, artists, engineers, teachers, diplomats, farmers on non-replicator colonies, and service workers on stations like Deep Space Nine. In the neutral zone from the next generation, 3 humans from the 21st century are revived from cryogenic suspension. One of them, Ralph Offenhouse, a financier, demands to know the state of his investments. Picard tells him money no longer exists. Offenhouse asks what people do all day. Picard responds that they work to better themselves and humanity. The statement is aspirational, but it reveals the structural truth. The Federation replaced material competition with social competition. Citizens do not work for survival. They work for status, purpose, and identity. The shift is profound. In a material economy, labor is tied to need. In a post-scarcity economy, labor is tied to meaning. The Federation does not tell its citizens what to do. It tells them what is valued. Scientific achievement, artistic contribution, exploration, teaching, and service to the collective are rewarded with recognition, opportunity, and social standing. Leisure is permitted, but it is not celebrated. The cultural message is clear. A life without contribution is a life without worth. This is not presented as oppression. It is presented as enlightenment, but the mechanism is the same. The Federation replaced economic pressure with cultural pressure. The result is that most citizens internalize the expectation that they will work even when they do not need to. The system does not force compliance. It makes compliance feel like self-actualization. The cost is subtle. Citizens who do not contribute are not punished, but they are marginalized. They do not appear on screen. The Federation does not have visible unemployment because it does not recognize the concept. A citizen without a role is not unemployed. They are simply inactive, and inactivity is treated as a personal failure rather than a systemic outcome. The Federation does not need to enforce conformity. Its cultural engine does it automatically. Daily routines are shaped by this same logic. Federation citizens live in a world where basic needs are met effortlessly, but their schedules are still structured around obligations. Children attend school. Adults pursue careers. Families coordinate around social events and cultural expectations. The absence of economic pressure did not create a society of leisure. It created a society where labor is voluntary but culturally mandatory. The distinction matters because it determines what kind of dissent is possible. On Deep Space Nine, Jake Sisko chooses to become a writer instead of joining Starfleet. His father, Benjamin Sisko, supports the decision, but the tension is visible. Jake's choice is treated as valid, but also as unusual. The default expectation is service. Writing is acceptable because it contributes to culture, but the episode The Muse reveals the precarity of that position. Jake struggles to finish his work. He doubts his ability. The Federation does not punish him for his choice, but it does not provide a safety net for his uncertainty either. In a post-scarcity society, failure is not material, it is psychological. The Federation offers abundance, but it does not offer protection from the feeling of inadequacy. The structure extends to housing. On screen, most Federation citizens live in apartments or family homes that are aesthetically consistent. The interiors are clean, minimalist, and comfortable, but they are not personalized in the way that suggests deep individual expression. The aesthetic is uniform. This is not accidental. The Federation does not assign housing, but it does regulate access to desirable locations through a system of social priority. In Family from the Next Generation, Picard returns to his family vineyard in France. The estate has been in his family for generations. This implies that property ownership still exists, at least for certain legacy holdings. But it also implies that access to such property is restricted. Not everyone can live in a vineyard in France. The Federation does not use money to allocate scarce resources. It uses waitlists, merit, and social contribution. The mechanism is quiet but absolute. A young couple wanting to live in Paris does not buy an apartment. They apply for residency. The application is evaluated based on their work, their contributions, and their social standing. If they are scientists working on a prestigious project, their application is prioritized. If they are artists with no institutional backing, they wait. The Federation does not call this inequality. It calls it coordination. But the result is a system where access to desirable experiences is rationed by bureaucracy rather than price. This extends to travel. The Federation operates a vast network of transport systems. Shuttles, transporters, and starships move citizens between worlds. But on screen, most civilians do not appear to travel casually. In Voyager's homestead, Neelix describes his decision to leave Voyager and settle with a Talaxian colony. The decision is treated as permanent. He does not say he will visit. He says he is staying. This implies that long-distance travel, while technically available, is not casually accessible for civilians. The Federation does not restrict movement through law. It restricts movement through logistics. Starfleet personnel travel constantly because their work requires it. Civilians travel rarely because the infrastructure prioritizes function over leisure. The implication is that daily life in the Federation is more localized than the official narrative suggests. Most citizens live, work, and socialize within a single region or planet. They do not hop between worlds on a whim. The abundance is real, but it is not infinite. The Federation has limits. It simply hides them inside allocation systems that feel rational rather than restrictive. Education is another pillar. Federation children attend school from an early age. The curriculum is standardized across member worlds, with accommodations for species-specific needs. In Coming of Age from the Next Generation, Wesley Crusher takes the Starfleet Academy entrance exam. The exam is competitive. Only the top candidates are admitted. This reveals that even in a post-scarcity society, access to prestigious institutions is rationed. Not every child who wants to attend Starfleet Academy can do so. The Federation does not use wealth to determine access. It uses testing and merit, but the mechanism is still exclusionary. The cultural message is that merit justifies inequality. A child who does not pass the entrance exam is not denied opportunity. They are simply directed toward a different path. The Federation offers many paths, but not all paths are valued equally. A child who becomes an engineer on a colony world is contributing. A child who becomes a starship captain is exceptional. The system rewards the latter far more than the former, not through material wealth, but through prestige, opportunity, and influence. This creates a quiet pressure. Federation children grow up knowing that their worth will be measured by their achievements. The pressure is not economic. It is social. The result is a culture that valorizes ambition while claiming to have transcended competition. The contradiction is visible on screen, but it is never interrogated. Federation characters speak as though they are free from the anxieties that defined earlier eras, but their behavior reveals otherwise. One of the clearest examples is Starfleet itself. Starfleet is a volunteer organization, but it dominates Federation culture. Nearly every human character of significance in Star Trek serves in Starfleet or interacts with it directly. This is not coincidence. Starfleet is the most visible path to meaning in the Federation. It offers exploration, challenge, and purpose. But it also offers something more subtle. It offers structure. Daily life aboard a starship is highly regimented. Duty shifts, away missions, protocols, and chain of command define every day. Officers wake, work, eat, and socialize according to a rhythm determined by the ship's operational needs. The structure is not questioned because it is framed as necessary, but it is also appealing. In a society where material need has been eliminated, many citizens crave the clarity that structure provides. Starfleet offers that clarity. It tells you what to do, when to do it, and why it matters. The trade-off is autonomy. Starfleet officers surrender significant personal freedom in exchange for purpose. They cannot choose where they live. They cannot choose their assignments. They are subject to military discipline, even though Starfleet insists it is not a military. The contradiction is functional. Starfleet recruits by offering meaning, but it retains personnel through obligation. Once you join, leaving is socially complicated. In Lower Decks, from the Next Generation, Ensign Sito Jaxa is killed on a dangerous mission. Her death is barely acknowledged. The episode treats it as tragedy, but also as inevitable. She was doing her duty. The Federation does not mourn her as a victim of the system. It honors her as a contributor who gave everything. The mechanism is clear. The Federation values contribution above individual life. It does not say this explicitly, but the structure reveals it. Daily life for a Starfleet officer is shaped by the expectation that service comes first. Personal desires are secondary. Relationships are permitted but constrained. In The Loss from the Next Generation, Counselor Troi temporarily loses her empathic abilities. She considers resigning from Starfleet because she believes she can no longer perform her function. The idea that she might remain aboard the Enterprise simply because it is her home does not occur to her. Her identity is tied to her role. Without the role, she has no place. This is the hidden structure of Federation life. Identity is not separate from function. Citizens are defined by what they contribute. The system does not demand this through law. It demands it through culture. The result is a society where most people work not because they must, but because they cannot imagine a life where they do not. The social fabric reinforces this. Federation culture is deeply communal. On screen, characters gather in public spaces, 10 Forward, Quark's Bar, the Replimat. They socialize, they share meals, they discuss their lives. The gatherings are warm, but they are also evaluative. Characters are constantly assessing each other's contributions, choices, and status. In The Drumhead from the Next Generation, a crewman named Simon Tarsis is revealed to have lied about his heritage on his Starfleet application. His Romulan grandfather became a source of suspicion during a paranoid investigation. The episode condemns the witch hunt, but it also reveals the fragility of social standing in the Federation. A single lie, even a lie about something that should not matter, is enough to derail a career. The Federation does not have laws against lying on an application, but it has cultural expectations of transparency and integrity. Violating those expectations carries social consequences that feel permanent. Tarsis is not imprisoned, but his future in Starfleet is compromised. The Federation does not need to punish him formally. The damage is reputational, and in a society built on social contribution, reputation is everything. This creates a pressure to conform that is more powerful than legal enforcement. Citizens learn quickly that deviation from cultural norms, even minor deviation, carries costs. The Federation celebrates diversity in species and culture, but it enforces conformity in values. The values are presented as universal: cooperation, reason, compassion, and progress. These are not debated. They are assumed. A citizen who questions these values is not silenced, but they are marginalized. Their contributions are devalued. Their social standing erodes. On screen, dissent is rare. When it appears, it is almost always framed as misguided or dangerous. In the Masterpiece Society, From the Next Generation, the Enterprise encounters a genetically engineered colony that has created a perfect society through strict social planning. The colony's leader argues that his society works because every citizen has a purpose designed from birth. The episode condemns this as a loss of freedom, but it does not interrogate the Federation's own mechanisms of social control. The Federation does not assign roles at birth, but it channels ambition so effectively that most citizens end up in the roles the system needs them to fill anyway. The channeling begins in childhood. Federation schools teach critical thinking, but they also teach conformity to collective values. Children learn that their worth is measured by their contribution to society. They learn that individualism is acceptable only within boundaries that serve the collective. They learn that questioning Federation values is intellectually possible but socially unwise. The result is a generation of citizens who believe they are free because they are not coerced, but who have internalized the system's expectations so completely that coercion is unnecessary. The most effective form of control is the control that feels like choice. Federation governance operates on this principle. The Federation Council is a representative body elected by member worlds. Decisions are made through debate and consensus. The process is democratic, but it is also slow and bureaucratic. On screen, most Federation citizens do not engage with governance directly. They do not attend council sessions. They do not organize protests. They trust the system to function without their input. This trust is the system's greatest asset. It allows the Federation to govern without visible enforcement. But the trust is fragile. On Deep Space Nine, the Maquis Rebellion reveals what happens when that trust breaks. Federation colonists in the demilitarized zone are abandoned by the Federation as part of a treaty with Cardassia. The colonists are told to evacuate or accept Cardassian rule. Many refuse. They form the Maquis and fight back. The Federation condemns the Maquis as terrorists. Starfleet hunts them. The official narrative is that the Maquis are criminals who rejected the rule of law, but the episodes reveal a different truth. The Maquis are colonists who believed the Federation's promise of protection only to discover that the promise was conditional. When their interests conflicted with the Federation's strategic goals, they were discarded. The Federation does not call this betrayal. It calls it difficult diplomacy, but the colonists experienced it as betrayal, and their rebellion exposed a structural flaw. The Federation's post-scarcity abundance is not evenly distributed. Core worlds receive the full benefits. Frontier colonies operate with fewer resources and less support. The disparity is justified as logistical necessity, but it creates a two-tier system. Citizens on Earth live in a world of near-infinite comfort. Citizens on a border colony live with replicators that break, supply lines that fail, and the constant threat of external attack. Daily life on a frontier colony is nothing like daily life on Earth. The abundance is thinner, the work is harder, the social pressure to contribute is more explicit because survival depends on it. The Federation does not advertise this disparity. It frames frontier life as adventurous, noble, and voluntary. But the choice to settle on a frontier world is often a choice made by people who lack access to better options. The Federation does not force anyone to the frontier, but it structures opportunities so that some citizens are more likely to choose it than others. The Maquis Rebellion ends in failure. Most members are killed or captured. The survivors are integrated into Voyager's crew during the ship's long journey home. The integration is treated as redemption. Maquis crew members are given Starfleet uniforms and asked to serve. They comply. The message is clear. Dissent can be tolerated temporarily, but it must eventually conform to Federation structure. There is no mechanism for sustained opposition within the system. Citizens who reject Federation values have two options: leave Federation space or be absorbed back into it. This reveals the true nature of Federation daily life. It is not a life of unrestricted freedom. It is a life of managed choice. The choices are real, but the range of choices is narrowed by cultural expectation, bureaucratic allocation, and social pressure. The system works because most citizens internalize its logic. They do not feel constrained because the constraints align with values they have been taught to hold. The Federation does not need to enforce conformity. Conformity enforces itself. But the system has limits. It functions smoothly when resources are abundant and threats are external. When scarcity returns, even temporarily, the structure reveals its brittleness. On Voyager, the crew is stranded in the Delta Quadrant with no support from the Federation. Replicators are rationed. Energy is conserved. The abundance disappears, and with it, some of the cultural assumptions that define Federation life. In the cloud, Captain Janeway rations replicator used to preserve energy. Crew members complain. Neelix begins cooking with raw ingredients to supplement the replicators. The complaints are minor, but they reveal how dependent Federation citizens are on the infrastructure of abundance. When the infrastructure fails, even partially, the social contract weakens. On Deep Space Nine, the station operates under similar constraints. It is a Cardassian-built station, not a Federation starbase. Systems fail regularly. Replicators are limited. The promenade includes shops and services that would be unnecessary on a fully Federation-equipped station. Quark's Bar, the Replimat, and Garrick's Tailor Shop all exist because the station cannot provide everything its inhabitants need through replication alone. The result is a return to commerce. Latinum flows. Deals are made. The station's economy resembles pre-Federation capitalism far more than it resembles Earth. The Federation tolerates this because Deep Space Nine is technically Bajoran, not Federation, but the tolerance reveals a flexibility in Federation doctrine that is rarely acknowledged. The Federation claims to have transcended money, but it does not prevent its citizens from engaging with economies that use money. Starfleet officers on Deep Space Nine carry latinum. They gamble at Quarks. They buy goods. The behavior is treated as situational adaptation, but it also suggests that the post-scarcity mindset is shallow. When circumstances change, Federation citizens revert to transactional behavior quickly. This adaptability is both a strength and a weakness. It allows the Federation to function in diverse environments, but it also reveals that Federation values are not as deeply rooted as the official narrative suggests. The culture is aspirational, not absolute. Citizens behave according to Federation ideals when the infrastructure supports it. When the infrastructure fails, they behave according to older patterns. One of the clearest examples of this is the Federation's relationship with time. On screen, Federation citizens are rarely shown experiencing boredom or aimlessness. Their days are full. But the fullness is not organic, it is structured. Characters wake with purpose. They work, they socialize, they pursue hobbies. But the hobbies are almost always productive. In The Next Generation, Captain Picard studies archaeology, plays the flute, and performs Shakespeare. Riker plays the trombone and studies military history. Data paints and writes poetry. These activities are framed as leisure, but they are also forms of self-improvement. The Federation does not value passive leisure, it values active engagement. This creates a culture where rest is suspect. A character who spends a day doing nothing is not depicted as relaxed, they are depicted as troubled. In Hollow Pursuits, Lieutenant Barclay retreats into holodeck fantasies to escape the pressures of his duties. The episode treats this as a psychological problem. Counselor Troy intervenes. Barclay is encouraged to engage with reality rather than escape from it. The message is clear. Withdrawal from productivity is a symptom of dysfunction, not a valid choice. The Federation does not criminalize leisure, but it pathologizes excessive leisure. The result is a society where citizens feel guilty for resting. The guilt is not imposed externally, it is internalized. Citizens police themselves. They wake each day with a sense of obligation, not because they are forced to, but because they have been taught that a life without obligation is a life without value. This is the hidden engine of Federation daily life. The system does not compel, it shapes. It creates conditions where most citizens choose, freely and sincerely, to live according to the patterns the system requires. The choice feels authentic because the coercion is invisible. The Federation replaced the whip with the whisper. It replaced hunger with shame. It replaced economic necessity with cultural expectation. The mechanism is more efficient because it requires no enforcers. Citizens enforce it on themselves and on each other. But the system depends on abundance. When abundance falters, the cultural engine stalls. During the Dominion War, the Federation faces resource scarcity for the first time in generations. Starfleet stretches its personnel across too many fronts. Ships are lost faster than they can be replaced. The war drags on for 2 years. On screen, the strain is visible. Officers are exhausted. Casualties mount. The optimism that defines Federation culture erodes. In the Pale Moonlight, Captain Sisko authorizes a covert operation that involves lying, bribery, and accessory to murder in order to bring the Romulans into the war. The episode ends with Sisko justifying his actions. He believes he saved the Federation, but he also knows he violated its core values. The episode is often cited as a turning point in Star Trek's portrayal of the Federation, but it is not an aberration. It is a reveal. The Federation's values are conditional. When survival is at stake, the values bend. Sisko's actions are not punished, they are quietly accepted. The Federation does not formally endorse what he did, but it benefits from the outcome. The contradiction is structural. The Federation built a culture on ideals that it cannot afford to uphold when seriously threatened. The ideals are real, but they are not load-bearing. This has implications for daily life that are rarely explored. Federation citizens are raised to believe that their society operates according to principles that are absolute: cooperation, transparency, respect for life. But the citizens who serve in Starfleet during the Dominion War learn otherwise. They learn that the Federation will compromise its principles to survive. They learn that the line between the Federation and its enemies is thinner than they were taught. They learn that the post-scarcity utopia is contingent, not guaranteed. The psychological cost is significant. Officers who survive the war return to a Federation that looks the same but feels different. The abundance is still there. The replicators still work. But the certainty is gone. In what you leave behind, the war ends. The characters celebrate, but the celebration is muted. They know what was lost. They know what was done. The Federation won, but it paid for the victory with the illusion of its own moral superiority. This disillusionment does not spread to the civilian population. Most Federation citizens never learn the details of Sisko's actions or the compromises made during the war. The information is classified. The Federation controls the narrative. Civilians are told that the war was won through courage and sacrifice. They are not told about Section 31, the intelligence agency that operates outside Federation law. They are not told about the biological weapon developed to commit genocide against the founders. They are not told that their society, when pressed, behaves like every other society in history. The secrecy is structural. The Federation cannot function if its citizens lose faith in its principles. The cultural engine depends on belief. If citizens stop believing that the Federation is fundamentally different from other powers, the social cohesion that holds the system together weakens. Daily life in the Federation is bearable because citizens trust that the system is just. If that trust erodes, the obligations that structure daily life begin to feel like impositions. Section 31 exists precisely to preserve that trust. It operates in the shadows, doing the things the Federation cannot officially do: assassination, sabotage, espionage, and coercion. The organization is illegal, but it is tolerated because it is useful. It allows the Federation to maintain its ideals publicly while violating them privately. The contradiction is not hidden from everyone. Starfleet officers encounter Section 31 repeatedly, but they are discouraged from speaking about it. The message is clear: some truths are too dangerous to share. This creates a two-tier system of knowledge. Civilians live in a world where Federation principles are absolute. Starfleet officers live in a world where those principles are guidelines. The disparity is justified as necessary for security, but it also means that daily life in the Federation is built on a foundation of selective ignorance. Most citizens do not know how their society really functions. They are told a story, and they believe it because the story is comfortable and the infrastructure supports it. But the infrastructure is not neutral. It is designed to channel behavior in specific directions. Replicators eliminate hunger, but they also eliminate the need for agriculture on most worlds. This centralizes food production and makes the population dependent on technology they do not control. If the replicators fail, most Federation citizens cannot feed themselves. The system is efficient, but it is also brittle. A single point of failure can cascade across entire worlds. The same is true for energy. The Federation runs on antimatter, generated at a small number of production facilities and distributed across the quadrant. The distribution network is vast, but it is also vulnerable. An attack on a key facility could cripple multiple sectors. The Federation mitigates this risk through redundancy and defense, but the risk remains. Daily life in the Federation is comfortable because the systems work. But the comfort is contingent on the continued functioning of infrastructure that most citizens do not see and cannot repair. This dependence shapes behavior in subtle ways. Federation citizens trust technology implicitly. They do not question how their food is made or where their energy comes from. They trust that the systems will continue to function because the systems have always functioned. This trust makes them passive. They do not develop the skills or knowledge necessary to survive without the infrastructure. They are, in a very real sense, domesticated by abundance. The domestication is not total. Frontier colonists retain some self-sufficiency. Starfleet officers are trained to operate in hostile environments. But the average citizen on a core world like Earth is completely dependent on systems they do not understand. If those systems fail, they are helpless. The Federation does not prepare its citizens for this possibility because preparing for it would undermine the narrative of post-scarcity permanence. The narrative matters because it shapes identity. Federation citizens define themselves in opposition to older forms of society. They are not driven by greed. They are not constrained by need. They are not violent or irrational. These beliefs are central to their self-image. But the beliefs are only sustainable in a context of abundance. When abundance disappears, the identity fractures. Federation citizens confront the fact that they are not fundamentally different from their ancestors. They are simply luckier. This is the deep mechanism. Daily life in the Federation is structured to prevent citizens from recognizing their own contingency. The abundance is real, but it is not guaranteed. The freedom is real, but it is not absolute. The values are real, but they are not load-bearing under pressure. The Federation built a society that works beautifully as long as nothing breaks. But the systems are fragile, the culture is shallow, and the citizens are unprepared for the possibility of loss. On screen, this fragility is rarely acknowledged. The Federation is portrayed as stable and enduring, but the cracks are visible. The Maquis Rebellion, the Dominion War. Section 31. The compromises Sisko makes, the exhaustion Janeway feels, the disillusionment Picard experiences in his later years. These are not isolated failures. They are symptoms of a system that cannot live up to its own ideals. Daily life in the Federation is pleasant because the infrastructure supports it, but the pleasantness is not the same as freedom. Citizens are obligated, constrained, and monitored in ways that are invisible precisely because they are effective. The Federation does not need to police its citizens because the citizens police themselves. The system does not need to punish dissent because dissent is culturally untenable. The structure is self-reinforcing, and it works because most citizens never question it. But the system only works in one direction. It channels ambition, structures time, and allocates resources according to priorities determined by the central bureaucracy. A citizen who wants to live differently, who wants to opt out of the cultural engine, has no clear path to do so. They can leave Federation space, but that is not a choice. It is exile. The Federation does not force anyone to stay, but it makes leaving so socially and logistically difficult that most citizens never attempt it. This is the final constraint. The Federation offers abundance, but it demands conformity. It offers purpose, but it defines what purpose means. It offers freedom, but only within boundaries it controls. The result is a society that feels open but is structurally closed. Citizens believe they are free because they can choose their work, their hobbies, and their relationships. But the range of acceptable choices is narrower than they realize. The options are predetermined. The outcomes are managed. The freedom is real only to the extent that it does not threaten the system. Daily life in the Federation is not the life of free individuals pursuing their own happiness. It is the life of managed subjects pursuing goals that align with collective priorities. The system is humane. It is comfortable. But it is not liberating. The Federation replaced one form of control with another. It replaced material coercion with cultural coercion. The mechanism is gentler, but it is no less absolute. The Federation's greatest achievement is making this control feel like progress. Citizens experience their obligations as meaningful. They experience their constraints as reasonable. They experience their conformity as virtue. The system does not need to force compliance, because compliance feels like self-determination. The Federation built a society where the most effective prison is the one that does not feel like a prison at all. And that is the answer to the question. Daily life in the Federation is structured, obligated, and constrained. It is pleasant because the infrastructure works. It is bearable because the culture frames obligation as purpose. It is stable because dissent is marginal. But it is not the utopia the official narrative describes. It is a managed system where abundance has replaced hunger, but where control remains the organizing principle. The Federation eliminated scarcity, but it did not eliminate the need to channel human behavior toward collective goals. It simply found a more efficient way to do so. The mechanism is invisible until it breaks. Then, suddenly, the structure is obvious. The values bend. The principles are compromised. The citizens who believed they were free discover they were always conditional. The Federation is not a lie, but it is not the whole truth either. It is a system that works as long as nothing goes wrong. And in a galaxy as hostile as the Star Trek universe, something always goes wrong. The Federation survived the Dominion War, but it did so by becoming something other than what it claimed to be. The question is not whether the Federation can endure. It will. The question is whether its citizens will continue to believe in the story they have been told, because the moment they stop believing, the cultural engine stalls. And without the engine, the Federation is just another power, managing scarcity and rationing freedom like every other government in history. The difference is that the Federation convinced its citizens the rationing was not happening. It convinced them they were free while structuring every aspect of their lives. That is the hidden mechanism of Federation daily life. The post-scarcity utopia is not a world without constraint. It is a world where constraint is so deeply embedded in culture that it no longer feels like constraint at all. The citizens are not oppressed, they are optimized. The system is not tyrannical, it is efficient. And efficiency, once internalized, is indistinguishable from freedom. Until the day the infrastructure fails and the citizens realize they never learned how to live without it. The Federation built a society that only works in one configuration: abundant resources, functional infrastructure, cultural cohesion. When all three align, the system is extraordinary. But when any one of them falters, the illusion collapses. Daily life in the Federation is not sustainable without the mechanisms that produce it. And those mechanisms are not eternal. They are contingent, fragile, and maintained by forces most citizens never see. The Federation tells its citizens they are free, and they believe it. Because the abundance is real, the comfort is real, and the purpose is real. But the freedom is not. It never was. The Federation replaced one set of constraints with another and called it liberation. The citizens accepted the trade because the new constraints were invisible. They traded material struggle for cultural obligation. They traded economic competition for social competition. They traded the whip for the whisper, and they did it willingly because the alternative was never presented. That is the truth of daily life in the Federation. It is a life designed by a system that prioritizes stability, contribution, and collective purpose above individual autonomy. It is a life where most citizens never question the structure because the structure feels natural. It is a life where dissent is rare because dissent has been made socially untenable. It is a life that works, but only as long as the citizens continue to believe in the story they have been told, and belief, once lost, cannot be restored. The Federation is not a dystopia. It is something more subtle. It is a system that achieved comfort, purpose, and stability at the cost of genuine freedom. The citizens do not notice the cost because they were never taught to value freedom as something distinct from purpose. They were taught that freedom is the ability to contribute. And in a society that defines worth through contribution, that teaching is enough. But it is not liberation. It is domestication. And daily life in the Federation is the life of domesticated people who believe they are wild.